Jai Shri Ram. Sweets are often the most tempting source of empty calories for many of us. In efforts to lose weight, attain our ideal physique, or just to get healthier, reducing our consumption of sweets is a common undertaking. However, many, if not most of us, really struggle with this and succumb to the temptation more often than we'd like, or more often than we'd care to admit. So I wanted to share some tips on overcoming this that have solved this problem for me in my own life and hopefully will help you as well. Now, as I may have mentioned before, I used to be quite fat, which you wouldn't have known from my videos because I had started to lose weight long before I made my channel. But anyway, in the past, when I was unhealthy, I had tried to give up sweets entirely, stuck with that venture for a couple weeks or even well over a month, and then eventually gave into temptation and gave up basically because it was too hard. That is the first thing that I would advise against doing, which is just trying to give it up entirely. And the reason for that is we eat sweets on holidays. They may be given as prasad in temples. People may mark special occasions in their life by celebrating with sweets, or a meal, or celebrating with a meal that includes sweets. So trying to give them up entirely is just going to make things unnecessarily difficult for you, and you're just not going to be able to have a normal, natural relationship with food if you do that. What I would instead recommend is to limit your sweet consumption to some particular kind of situation in your life. Maybe as a rule, you'll only eat sweets if they're offered to you. Maybe you'll only eat them on holidays and never any other time. What I do personally is that I only eat sweets when I visit my mom, which I do once a week, every weekend, and then sometimes also once during the work week. So she'll make some kind of laddu or Mysore pak or ragi halwa or something of that sort, and I'll eat as much as I want of that and not worry about portions or calories at all because I've created this rule, and that's what keeps me limiting myself to a healthy amount of sugar. Maybe I would adjust it if people offered me sweets on special occasions or something like that. It just hasn't really come up because of COVID and work from home and so on and so forth. Anyway, what all of these strategies that I've just kind of laid out have in common is basically two things. One, they don't allow you to buy sweets yourself. And two, they don't allow you to prepare sweets yourself. Because if you buy them yourself or you prepare them yourself, there's nothing stopping you from overindulging unless you then create another rule for yourself that you're only going to do either of these things on certain occasions. But you want to keep these rules simple and basic so that they're easy to follow and you can just kind of naturally be in a normal habit of not overindulging. Following such rules, and by such rules I mean the rules I'm saying you should create, not the overly complex ones. Following such rules also removes the element of having to say no to temptation at every specific instance when you have an opportunity to eat sweets. Meaning that if you abide by some rule, the only question that you have to ask yourself is, would eating this sweet at this particular time conform to my rule or not? If the answer is yes, then you can eat it. If the answer is no, obviously you cannot eat it. It's also important to either create a portion size rule or make the times that you allow yourself to eat sweets rare enough that portion size isn't an issue. Because if you don't do that, you're again getting into the problem of having to say no to every particular thing instead of just having your rule make the decision for you, which is basically the theme of what I'm telling you to do is have this decision on whether you're going to eat something made by your rule when it comes to sweets, not by your mind, because your mind isn't going to be thinking about health. It's going to be thinking about health on some high, logical, idealistic kind of level, but on the base level, it's going to be fantasizing about how sweet and delicious this particular treat of horrifying empty calories is going to be for you as opposed to your actual health and fitness. Another thing that you should do in order to tackle your desire to eat sweets is getting rid of any sugar in your diet outside of sweets. Meaning that if you drink tea or coffee containing sugar, stop putting sugar in it. And I know that if anybody was thinking of following my advice when I just said that, they're going to click off this video and say that this is too difficult and not follow it and say that that's dumb. Anyway, you should do that. If you drink fruit juice or any kind of sweetened beverage, stop doing that. And in cooking, if you need to add a sweetener, just stick with jaggery and just stick with enough to counteract whatever sour or astringent taste you're trying to neutralize with the addition of a sweetener. Don't put so much into it that you're actually making the dish itself sweet. Also, in the same vein, if you use any kind of store-bought sauces or seasonings, check to see if they have any kind of sugar or other sweeteners in them, and if so, stop using them. A large proportion of them do. Even things that don't really seem sweet at all have some kind of sweetener in them. Now, of course, you could again go the route of including or not including these by creating more and more rules, stacking them on top of each other. But again, like I said, you want to keep these things simple. You want to keep them specific and easy to follow. And the reason that it's so important to get the sweet taste, the taste of sugar outside of actually eating sweets, out of your diet is that it changes your tastes to prefer less sweet things and also to prefer a milder sweetness. Whether sugar, salt, alcohol, caffeine, or any other such thing, your body becomes accustomed to a certain amount of it, and therefore you need more and more to be able to get the same effect. And so the opposite is also true. If you lessen your use of them, you will also prefer less of it in your food over time for a milder taste. In this case, a milder sweetness, of course. Now, I'll give you a personal example of myself. Now, before I started to get healthy, and this process started before I even made my channel, before I started to get healthy, my favorite Indian sweets were gulab jamun, badusha, and padar perni. Padar perni is like chiroti or khaja that people in the north or the east would have been familiar with. We eat it in the south. These are my three favorite Indian sweets and also three of the sweetest Indian sweets that I'd ever eaten. And I was also a fan of every single Western sweet that you could imagine. I mean, cookies, brownies, cupcakes, muffins, cakes, pies, cheesecake, and of course the universal global Western favorites of ice cream and chocolate. But since getting healthy and applying these strategies to my diet, I've gotten away from Western sweets entirely. Part of that is also because many of them contain egg and I don't eat eggs anymore. But now, anyway, my favorite Indian sweets, if you were going to ask me the same question now, would be laddus, Mysore pak, and mulka. And most people are, of course, not familiar with what mulka is because it's only eaten in coastal Karnataka, I believe. Basically, you take jackfruit pods, grind that, basically puree them into a paste, mix it with some kind of flour, I don't know which flour it is, and then you stir this together, make a batter out of it, and ball it up and fry these, basically just balls of this jackfruit flour batter. And there's no sugar added to it at all. I don't know, I mean, maybe there are people that add jaggery or something to it, I don't know, but all the times that I've had it, there's been no additional sugar in it. The sweetness just comes from the jackfruit itself. Now, all three of these things, the laddus, or at least the laddus that I eat made by my mom, and the Mysore pak that she makes, and the mulka, these are pretty mild in sweetness compared to what I really used to prefer, things that were, coated in sugar syrup or powdered sugar and things like that. So that's a perfect example of how, like I was saying, your actual tastes will actually change to prefer something that's more mild as opposed to something that's more sweet, that you have kind of trained yourself to like over a period of time of eating the way that you have been eating since, maybe your whole life or whatever the case may be. And another thing that's also important to keep in mind when talking about health in general and healthy eating is fruits are naturally sweet. And when you cut out your consumption of sugar outside of sweets and then your taste kind of change to prefer a milder sweetness, your taste for and appreciation for the sweetness of fruits really grows. Both mild fruits or sweet fruits or dried fruits, all of this appreciation of these kinds of foods will grow because you're becoming healthier, you're changing what you're becoming accustomed to, so on and so forth. So I hope that these tips are really able to help you on your journey to becoming healthy, because the most important thing about dietary change is actually not just making the changes, but sticking to them long-term and indefinitely, which is why I'm sharing these tips that You need to create a relationship with sweets and a relationship with food that you can just have for the rest of your life, which will give you a healthy diet, give you the physique you want, all of those kinds of things. And I also wanted to close with this. We never really, in common parlance, think of sugar as being a drug because, we've been eating it since we're small children and there's no, control of it as a controlled substance. You have to be a certain age to buy it like alcohol or something like that. But sugar has an addictive quality just like any other drug. And so when people find it so kind of tempting and addictive and, so difficult to kick this habit or lessen it and so on, the reason is because it is physiologically an addictive substance. And if you don't believe that, first off, if you don't believe that, you're just lying to yourself. So stop lying to yourself. Secondly, you can look online for, various different people coming from a health perspective, coming from a longevity perspective, coming from a mental perspective. So many different perspectives are there. Just look into their research, just do some basic research, and you'll find out that it's an addictive substance. So anyway, that's all I've got for you guys today. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe. I hope that you're able to benefit from these tips that I'm sharing to become a healthier, more the kind of person that you envision yourself to be in terms of health, physique, and all of that. Jai Shri Ram.